All right, for chapter 12, we're going to be discussing inheritance patterns and human genetics. We'll start out by talking about what gene expression is. Gene expression is the activation or the turning on of a gene that results in the transcription and production of mRNA. So last chapter we talked about how we take our DNA molecule and then we transcribe it. We do the transcription process and make this mRNA message. Whenever we express a gene, that's what we're doing. We're taking a certain gene on the DNA and we're making a message from it. There are some genes that are expressed in our DNA, and there are some genes that are not expressed. We are still studying, trying to figure out why that could be. Most of the mRNA that we make is going to be then translated into proteins, which proteins, remember, they help us do many different functions inside of our cells. They carry out reactions, they help move things around. Whenever we talk about the genome, that refers to the complete genetic content or the genetic material contained in an individual. So that's a little review term from last chapter. One of the really important scientists whenever we discuss chromosomes and inheritance is Thomas Hunt Morgan. He did his work in the early 1900s and he did experiments with fruit flies. Fruit flies, I know they can be annoying whenever you have them around your food, but they are a very good subject to use for different types of experiments. They're really, really small, they're cheap, and they are able to produce a lot of offspring. So if you're studying genetics and you want to see how certain traits are passed down, fruit flies are a really good example of this. In fruit flies, he observed 4 pairs of chromosomes. Fruit flies don't have a lot of genetic information, so it's a lot easier to study. He noticed that 3 pairs of the chromosomes were the same in male and female fruit flies, but that 1 pair was different. He called this different pair between males and females sex chromosomes. So in general, the sex chromosomes contain the genes that determine the gender of an individual. So for example, in humans, we talked about females having 2X chromosomes and a male having an X and Y chromosome. Those X and Y chromosomes are the sex chromosomes. All of the other chromosomes that don't determine sex, those are going to be called the autosomes. So in mammals, we generally see that pattern that 2X chromosomes will make a mammal a female, and then 1X and 1Y will make a mammal a male. So that's another review from genetics earlier on. We also discussed this earlier in the year. When it comes to mammals, males usually determine the sex of the offspring. This is because each sperm cell has an equal chance of having either an X or a Y chromosome, but for the egg cells that are being carried by females, they only receive X chromosomes. So when we look at the sex cells, the egg cells, they're always going to pass down an X, but the sperm cell could pass down an X or a Y. So if the sperm cell passes down an X to an offspring, then that offspring will be a female because they'll get an X from mom and X from dad. If that sperm cell passes down a Y, then that individual will be a male. They would have gotten an X chromosome from mom and a Y chromosome from dad. Here is a picture of a karyotype, which we reviewed a little bit earlier this year. Remember, a karyotype shows all of the chromosomes of an individual. On the left, we have a karyotype of a female. We know that because when we look at the chromosomes, this person has 2X chromosomes down to the bottom right of that chart. So that would be a female, 2X chromosomes. We can see all the other chromosomes there as well. The chart on the right has a male karyotype. We know that because this person has an X and a Y. So that was something that we talked about earlier this year. Just wanted to review that real quick with you guys before we move on. Sometimes in genetics, we talk about linked genes. These are pairs of genes that tend to be inherited together. These are going to be genes that are close together on the same chromosome. These genes that are linked together, they usually don't follow Mendel's law of independent assortment. That means that, for example, the body color of a fly, the eye color of a fly, and the wings of a fly, if those are linked together, then those types of genes might be inherited together. So if we see changes or problems occurring in some of those genes, it might affect all of those characteristics. There are also traits that are called sex-linked traits. These are traits that are going to be coded for by alleles on the sex chromosomes. For example, if you have genes that are only found on the X chromosome, this would be called an X-linked gene. So this makes things a little bit more complicated because some genes are only found on the female sex chromosomes, and some genes are found only on the Y sex chromosomes. So we'll look at some examples of those. Now, we've seen in pictures that the X chromosome is much larger than the Y chromosome. Since this is the case, there are going to be more X-linked traits than Y-linked traits. The X chromosome just contains more information, so it has more genes on it that are specific to the X chromosome than the Y chromosome has on it. Now, here's an important note. Since males only have one X chromosome, right? Males are XY, they only have one. A male who carries the recessive allele on their X chromosome will show that X-linked trait. A great example of this is red-green color blindness. Red-green color blindness is an X-linked recessive trait. That means if you have the recessive allele on your X chromosome and you're a male, you are going to have red-green color blindness. If you're a female and you have just one recessive letter on one of your X chromosomes, you're not going to have red-green color blindness because your other X chromosome would have a dominant letter, which would be for normal vision. So in this case, some X-linked traits, some sex-linked traits are more likely to show up in males since they only have one X chromosome. Whatever trait they have on that X chromosome is what they're going to have. So in this picture below, we see the 5. Well, you should see a 5 in that circle, a green 5. But this is a test for some people. If they can't see that 5, that might be an indication that they have red-green color blindness, which, just you might see all those different circles as a similar color. It might be really hard to find where that 5 is amongst all those other colors. So that's an example of a X-linked trait. Another great example of sex-linked traits is eye color in fruit flies. In fruit flies, having red eyes, capital RR, is going to be dominant to having white eyes, which is represented by lowercase r. However, white eyes tend to only show up in male flies. So the white eye color is recessive and it tends to show up only in males. This is because the gene for eye color is carried on the X chromosome. The Y chromosome lacks that eye color gene. So whatever the male fruit fly gets on its one X chromosome, that's the color eyes that it's going to have. Remember, females have two X chromosomes. So the only way that females get white eyes is if they have two lowercase r's. A male only has to have that one lowercase r because it's not going to have another r. It only has one X chromosome, and that X chromosome is the only thing that carries an r. So the X chromosome carries the gene for eye color, either X with a capital R, which would be for red eyes, or X with a lowercase r, which would be for white eyes. If we were to crossbreed a female that's X capital R, with a male that is X lowercase r and a Y, all of the females would be X capital R, X lowercase r. The female's got an X with a capital R from their mother, and the female's got an X with a lowercase r from their father. So this means that all of the females would still have red eyes, because that capital R would dominate over the lowercase r. In this example, all of the males would also have red eyes because they only get the X chromosomes from their mother. And in this case, the female had X capital R. So in that case, we would see all of the offspring have red eyes, even though the father fly had white eyes. Now, in the F2 generation, or the grandkids of those flies, half of the females would have X capital R, red eyes, and half of the females would have X capital R, X lowercase r, which would still give them red eyes. So far, still no chance of a female having red eyes in this example. However, in males, half of them would get an X capital R and a Y from their parents. They would still have red eyes, but half of the males would get the X chromosome that has the lowercase r on it from their mother, and they would have white eyes. So in this case, we see that there's a couple things that need to happen to get white-eyed fruit flies, and when you do get them, they are usually male. So whenever you come across a fruit fly that has white eyes, there is a really good chance that it is a male. There's still a chance it could be a female, but it is a much higher chance that it is a male. So here is a Punnett square to show you this process. On picture A over to the left, your Punnett square over to the left, we've taken a male that has white eyes, X lowercase r, Y, and we crossed it with a female that has red eyes, X capital R, X capital R. When we cross those two, we find that all of the offspring in that Punnett square have red eyes, even though some of the females have a X with a lowercase r. They still have that X with a capital R. It dominates over it, so they still have red eyes. Now, in the Punnett square over to the right, we've taken two of those flies from the inside Punnett square on the left, and we've crossbred them. So we've taken a male that has X capital R and a Y, red eyes, and we crossed it with one of the females that has X capital R, X lowercase r. In this case, we see that most of the offspring would have red eyes, but about 25%, 1 out of 4, has white eyes. And those that have white eyes are going to be X lowercase r, Y. They're all going to be male flies. So that picture shows us how that works out genetically with our Punnett square. So let's work through one more example with fruit flies. Let's take a red-eyed male, which is X capital R, Y, and let's cross it with a white-eyed female, X lowercase r, X lowercase r. Notice that's the only way you can get a white-eyed female. We'll take those two flies and do a Punnett square for them and see what we get. So here's our Punnett square as we are used to drawing and setting up. Now in our example, we're taking red-eyed males and we're crossing it with a white-eyed female. So remember, the Y chromosome in males does not carry the trait, so there's no letter up above the Y chromosome. Those R's are only above the X chromosome to show that they are attached to that X chromosome. So if an organism has two capital R's with its X chromosomes, that would be a red-eyed female. If you have a capital R and a lowercase r with your X chromosomes, you would still have red eyes. The only way that you would have a white-eyed female would be if you have lowercase r on both of your X chromosomes. XY is going to be a male, XX is going to be female. So up on top, we have placed the female with X's and the two lowercase r's. Over to the left of your Punnett square, we have placed the male with its red eyes with the capital R above that X chromosome and the Y chromosome. And now we fill out the Punnett square like we have been doing this year. So in that first box, we should have an X with a capital R, an X with a lowercase r. In the next box, we should have an X with a capital R and an X with a lowercase r. So what's on the side of the box and what's on top goes in that little square. On the bottom left, we have an X with a lowercase r and then a Y. Notice for males, the X chromosome always goes first. And then for the next male, we have X with a lowercase r and then a Y. So in this case, we have a 50-50 chance that the offspring would have white eyes, but out of those ones that have white eyes, 100% of them are going